Best book summary from a philosopher's notes. Managers Not MBAs by Henry Mintzberg. What you will learn. In this abstract, you will learn 1. What's wrong with Master of Business Administration schools, programs and graduates. 2. Why many of the worst charges leveled against MBAs are true. And 3. What steps should be taken to improve MBA programs. The charges. Only 3 things are seriously wrong with business schools and MBA programs: they train the wrong people, they teach the wrong way, and they produce the wrong result. Business schools draw their students from a self-selecting population. Ambitious youngsters with good grades and high scores on standardized tests apply to business school. Why? They know that, if they leave school with an MBA, master's degree in business administration, they'll be on the career fast track. They'll be able to fly by workplace colleagues who have spent their time working on the job and gaining experience instead of sitting in a classroom analyzing hypothetical situations. Business schools operate on the presumption that management is a science and that an MBA grad is a professional. Management is not a science. A science involves the pursuit of knowledge. Managers do not pursue knowledge. They have a completely different function. If management is not a science, is it a profession? The professions of law, medicine and engineering have codified modes of practice. In a profession, some things clearly work and some things clearly do not. But management has no such code of proven, accepted practice. A student can go to school and learn to be a doctor, lawyer or engineer. But no student can go to school and learn to be a manager. The only way to learn to be a manager is by managing. What is managing? It is helping others do well. Ask if the self-selecting students who attend top MBA schools intend to help others do well or to help themselves do well. The answer is patently obvious. One might plausibly suggest that job applications ask, "Do you have an MBA?" In much the same spirit as they ask, "Have you been convicted of a felony?" Some felons reform. Some MBAs become decent managers, but the prognosis is generally not good. Teaching the wrong things, the wrong way. Business schools have changed little since the early 20th century. They teach economics and the various functional disciplines of business, accounting, marketing, finance and such. They take an analytical approach to things that, while they may be analyzed, do not necessarily benefit from it. Consider, for example, strategy. If any part of business should be viewed as dependent on subtle factors such as content, it's strategy. A strategist must consider the resources, the people and the facts of a unique situation and must, somehow, bring all of those considerations together in a plan. A strategist must synthesize and have the gift of intuition. But business schools approach strategy using the methodology of Michael Porter, who wrote, "I favor a set of analytic techniques to develop strategy. Analysis is not strategy." Porter's approach offers little to managers, although it offers a great advantage to business school professors. It makes them look more scientific and intellectually credible. The consequences of MBA education are fairly dismal. MBAs spend some time away from the real world of work and management. They leave school knowing that their new MBA degrees put them in a class above workers who lack such degrees. They are quite confident. They are also incompetent. The combination of high confidence and low competence produces arrogance. Really great leaders and really gifted managers are humble. You won't find much humility among MBAs. MBAs generally gravitate to such fields as investment banking and consulting. These areas provide ample occasion for the MBA to apply what business school teaches: analysis and presentation. They do not provide much opportunity for real, hands-on management. MBAs in these fields tell other people what to do, and then they leave. Other people take the consequences of the advice, good or bad. When MBAs take jobs in real companies that make real things, they tend to avoid the real parts of the business. They don't tend to get involved in selling or operations. Those functions demand specific knowledge that depends on context and can only be gained by experience. MBAs tend to find their way into staff jobs in human resources or strategic planning. Those jobs are somewhat remote from the real business, tend to rely on abstract knowledge, and, therefore, tend to be extensions of the MBA school experience. MBAs are notorious bandwagon riders. They swarm toward hot fields. They are like naive investors driven by momentum who chase the stock that has just gone up in the hope of riding a further rise. Leaders, by contrast, do not tend to jump on bandwagons. One can almost predict that a surge of MBAs entering an industry presage that PhD decline. But MBAs swarm to trendy PhDs for the same reason the famous robber Willie Sutton robbed banks, that's where the money is. MBAs are mercenaries. Their view of leadership is that it provides an opportunity for self-advancement. Exemplary MBAs. Considering some famous MBAs of recent history is illuminating. Consider, for example, Robert Strange McNamara, who earned an MBA from Harvard in 1939. He was a member of Harvard's faculty for 3 years before his World War II service. He spent the war years as a statistical control officer. After the war, he and a group of veterans joined Ford Motor Company as a band tagged the Whiz Kids. They rose rapidly and eventually produced 2 presidents of Ford, including McNamara. Appointed Secretary of Defense by President John Kennedy, McNamara applied MBA principles to the Department of Defense from 1961 to 1968, when its most important project was the Vietnam War. McNamara developed an approach to waging war by the numbers, placing great emphasis on body counts. When told that the American-supported government in South Vietnam was becoming unpopular among peasants, McNamara asked for numbers to back the statements, statistics, not soft realities. One military writer referred to this approach as an educated incapacity to see the war in its true light. McNamara went on to become head of the World Bank. He once again set forth a strategy based on analysis and supported by numbers. This approach succeeded no better in economic development than it had in war. McNamara is not an isolated example. In 1990, author David Ewing published Inside the Harvard Business School. His book identified 19 alumni who had climbed to the top in business. A look at this roster 10 years later revealed that getting to the top was a distinctly short-term phenomenon. Most eventually distinguished themselves by egregious failure. A few managed to cling to mere mediocrity. Successes were rare. Consider, William A.G. ran Morrison Knudsen Corporation into bankruptcy. Darcy Macias Benton and Bowles shut down just a few years after the departure of 10-year CEO Roy Bostock. Robert Cizik left Cooper Industries after a big acquisition failed. Marshall Kogan was forced out of Knoll International Holdings just ahead of the company's bankruptcy. Levi Strauss CEO Robert Haas surrendered his post when the FIRM hit dire straits. Robert Hopfer had such trouble with sun exploration and production that it earned the contempt of Wall Street. Richard Jeanneret headed Equitable Life, a company that lingered in mediocrity. Frank Lorenzo ran 3 airlines, Eastern Texas Air, Continental, into trouble, clashed with employees and presided over 2 bankruptcy filings. Shareholders forced Vernon Laux out of Baxter International because they were fed up with unacceptable performance. Prosecutors convicted the company of a felony. Robert Mallet of FMC was known for questionable performance and strategy. Joseph McKinney was forced to retire from the Tyler Corporation because his conglomerate did so poorly it had to be broken up. Jerry Perlman had to retire from Zenith because he could not make it successful. The board of American Express gave James D. Robinson his walking papers. Cray Computers suffered massive losses shortly after John Rollwagon left. Did these corporate failures have anything to do with the education these MBAs received? A review of press accounts shows that these CEOs were often criticized for self-interest, indifference to or exploitation of employees, failure to understand the context of the business and more. Jeff Skilling of Enron presents a very egregious example of an MBA in action. He was a star at the Harvard Business School. His focus on shareholder value and his indifference to everyone and everything else, including ethics and law, is fairly characteristic of MBAs. A better way? One of the interesting things about the MBA phenomenon is the degree to which MBA jargon has penetrated non-business areas of society. Government institutions and even churches have begun to think of themselves and their mission in terms of MBAs, defining clients, analyzing performance by the numbers and so on. The consequences of bad MBA education include a society whose institutions do not really understand themselves, their mission or the criteria for their success. Reforming management training into something positive instead of something negative requires thinking about management education in an entirely new way. The following propositions will help. Provide management education, but give it only to experienced, practicing managers. Determine management school admission by aptitude, as identified by an objective unbiased performance assessment. Students should not be self-selecting. Design new classroom training, have it draw on and build on experience. Theory is important and abstraction is important. Managers need theories and frameworks to help them understand what they experience. Theory should challenge, not reinforce conventional wisdom. False theories, alternative theories and uncomfortable theories all have their place in the management classroom. Reflection is indispensable. Slack time is the most valuable time in a management program. Cramming as much work as possible into every minute subtracts from the educational experience. Share skills. In addition to sharing concepts, managers in the classroom should share competencies, including such skills as reflection, strategic thought, time management, dealing with people and communicating. These are among management's most important functions, yet business schools do a very inadequate job of teaching them, partly because they are difficult, if not impossible, to teach. Send teams to management school. Management education is only valuable insofar as it affects an organization, so train people in work units. Focus management education. Emphasize the process of experienced reflection. McGill University in Montreal worked with other schools to create a program incorporating these propositions, the International Masters in Practicing Management, IMPM. Management education is fundamentally but perhaps not fatally flawed. The world needs better managers, but today's system of management education does not and cannot provide them. The MBA degree trains analysts, not managers. Business schools exist and are run for the benefit of the faculty, not for the benefit of society. Businesses and society need to hold educators' feet to the fire and demand management education that provides valuable managers, not just high-priced divas and dilettantes. Thank you. Please subscribe.